Labeling theory. Most people commit deviant acts, thus there is no point distinguishing deviant acts from other acts, some argue. Becker gives a clear idea of the labeling argument by drawing on Malinowski's study of islanders. Um, he saw that one particular youth was publicly accused of incest, and the islanders expressed disgust and horror. But on further investigation, it was not uncommon on the island, but discreet. Becker therefore argues the following: 1. Just because somebody breaks rules doesn't mean that the other will define it as deviant. 2. Someone has to enforce rules or draw attention to it. Usually they have vested interests. If, for example, if the person is successfully labeled, then the consequences would follow. Most sociological theory takes for granted that once a deviant or criminal is has committed a crime, then the response will be uniform. This is not necessarily true. Akers, 1967, criticised labeling theory for presenting deviants as no different from anyone else until they are given a label, and there must be some reason why the label is applied. If a labeling theorist can't explain it, it's an incomplete theory. Edwin Lemert, 1972, distinguished primary and secondary deviance. Primary is the rule breaking which is of little self-importance. Secondary is the consensus of the response from others which is significant. For example, in his study on the Inuits who had a chronic stammer, the problem was caused by the importance given to speech making, and therefore it was a humiliating experience. Some children became over anxious about their speaking abilities that led to chronic stammering. In this example, chronic stammering, secondary deviance, is a response to parents' reaction to minor speech defects. The person labeled deviant will see themselves as mad or bad. The person who is labeled deviant will see themselves as unworthy. Baker said that once a label has been successfully applied, then all other qualities are unimportant. They are responded to solely in terms of this master status. Labeling theory has not directly influenced policy, but elements of it, such as ASBO orders, have combated youth offending. People who have these orders imposed on them can be publicly identified, and their photo can go up in a local shop. The aim is to humiliate the individual and to inform the community that something is being done about this antisocial behavior. However, this could create a master status for the individual. Rejecting labels. The process of being labeled is open to rejection. In a recent study of young male prostitutes, found that although they had sex with other men, they were regarded when they did as workers and saw themselves as street. Creating rules. Welling saw that the process of looking at how social life was open to negotiation, and that rule enforcement was no different to other social activities. Then attention shifted to law creation. Becker in 1963 suggested that rules are created by someone's initiative. Um, and we can think of people who exhibit such enterprises as moral entrepreneurs. Labeling theorists such as seek to create and enforce laws to benefit a cause or society, for example. Becker demonstrated that in his study um, about outlawing cannabis in 1937, its outlawing was successful. A campaign by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. It was only successful because it was plugged into the commonly held values. The belief, for instance, the belief that people ought to be in control of their own actions and decisions to the pleasure for its own sake is wrong. 3 drugs were seen as addictive and as such enslaved people. Becker describes this as a moral crusade. Criticisms include Marxist writers have challenged the idea that there are those who seek to pass laws and impose them on others, as they suggest there is a wider framework within this. Are all laws the product of moral entrepreneurs? If so, what are the conditions some groups fail and other why do some groups fail and others succeed? Labeling theory does not explain why some groups have more power and are able to get their laws that are beneficial to them passed. Becker says that labeling theory speaks for the underdog, the powerless. They provide a voice for the deviant, and said that labeling theorists have little to their challenges. Labeling theory shows that the law depends on social constructions of reality, enforcement and identity of rule breakers. The media play a key role in all 3. Deviancy amplification. Moral panics. Deviancy amplification was coined by Leslie Wilkins to show that the response by agencies such as police and media can generate an increase in deviancy. Wilkins, 1964, when acts become labelled as deviant, people become stigmatized and cut off from mainstream society. They become aware that they are treated as deviants and form a subculture which pushes them further into isolation. John Hughes' study of drug use in London illustrates this. Moral panic, the idea of a moral panic overlaps and complements the concepts of deviancy amplification. Stanley Cohen study of 2 youth groups, mods and rockers, were subcultures in the 1960s. Cohen showed how the media built up these 2 folk novels. The effect of media was to make young people categorize themselves as modders and rockers. This helped create violence between the groups and confirmed to the public that they were troublemakers. McRobbie and Thornton. Say moral panics as described by Cohen are outdated. They have to be seen in context of the development of the media and sophistication of the audience. They point out the frequency that there has been an increase of moral panics, that they are no longer noteworthy, where moral panics could scapegoat folk devils in the 1960s. There are different viewpoints and values in society. Reflexivity. Moral panics as a concept is so well known that many groups try to create it themselves. Created it themselves, so they do not wish to start a moral panic uncritically. Rebound people, like politicians from startup companies, family values or drugs, have to be very carefully considered. Labeling theory has been useful to understand the role of media and moral panics have filtered away into wider society. Thus, journalists and politicians are now aware of them and use them as beacons about what to take, what actions to take. Labeling theory.